The night was colder than usual, the kind of cold that crept into your bones and made silence even heavier. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled, their cries echoing across the empty plains. Inside his small, dimly lit cabin, Elijah Carter, a rancher who had long since grown used to loneliness, sat staring at the flames in his fireplace. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor, but his heart, despite his rugged life, was softer than he ever admitted. He thought this night would be like every other, quiet, predictable, and uneventful. But fate had other plans. A loud crash against his barn door jolted him from his chair. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer chased by coyotes. But then came the sound that stopped his breath cold. A weak, trembling voice, soaked in pain and desperation. "Please help me." The words pierced the silence like a knife, and Elijah froze, unsure if he had really heard them. Slowly, he reached for his lantern and stepped outside into the bitter night air. His boots crunched against the frost-bitten ground as he approached the barn. He lifted the lantern higher, and what he saw nearly made him drop it. There, slumped against the barn door, was a young woman, barely covered, her clothes torn to shreds, her body smeared with blood and dirt. She was trembling uncontrollably, her face pale, her lips quivering as she tried to whisper again, "Please help me." And then she went limp, falling forward. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. He was no stranger to the sight of blood. Life on a ranch had its share of injuries, but nothing prepared him for this. The woman was completely vulnerable, stripped of dignity, stripped of safety. For a moment, his instincts told him to run for help, to call into town, but the nearest neighbor was miles away, and she didn't have that kind of time. He dropped to his knees, gathering her into his arms with a gentleness that betrayed the strength in his hands. She was so light it scared him, as though she was fading right there in his arms. Inside the cabin, Elijah laid her carefully on his bed, covering her with every blanket he had. Her wounds needed tending, and though he wasn't a doctor, he'd patched enough injured animals and ranch hands to know how to stop bleeding. He cleaned her cuts with trembling hands, whispering softly, "You're safe here, no one's going to hurt you anymore." But inside, he wondered who she was, where she had come from, and what horror had driven her to his door. When dawn broke, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with both fear and confusion. She tried to sit up but winced in pain. Elijah quickly moved to her side. "Don't," he said softly. "You're hurt. Just rest." She studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for signs of danger, but found only sincerity in his weathered eyes. With a broken whisper, she said her name, Leela. Her story unfolded in fragments, each word heavy with pain. She had been running from men who wanted to use her, who had treated her like she wasn't human. She had escaped, but not without scars, some visible, some buried deep inside. As Elijah listened, his chest tightened. He had spent years pushing people away, building walls around his heart after losing his wife and unborn child in a tragic accident. Loneliness had been his shield, his punishment. But this broken young woman, bleeding, desperate, yet still clinging to life, was awakening something inside him he thought was long dead. He realized she didn't just need shelter. She needed someone to see her, to remind her she was more than what had been done to her. Days turned into weeks. Leela slowly regained strength under Elijah's care. He taught her how to ride his horses, how to mend fences, how to find peace in the rhythm of ranch life. She, in turn, began to heal wounds he had buried for years. In the quiet of the evenings, she would sit by the fire and tell him stories of her childhood, of dreams she once had before the world stole them from her. And he, for the first time in decades, found himself laughing again, feeling alive again. But healing wasn't without battles. Leela often woke in the middle of the night screaming, haunted by memories that clawed at her. There were times Elijah found her curled in a corner, shaking, whispering, "I'm not safe, they'll find me." And each time, he knelt beside her, steady and unshakable, saying, "Not here. Not while I'm breathing." His presence became her anchor, his cabin a sanctuary where the past couldn't reach her. Yet the world outside had not forgotten her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Elijah spotted riders approaching, 3 men hard-eyed, dangerous. Leela froze when she saw them through the window. "It's them," she whispered, her voice breaking. Fear surged through her, but Elijah's expression turned to stone. For the first time in years, he had someone, worth protecting again. The confrontation was brutal. The men demanded Leela back, but Elijah stood his ground. "She's not yours," he growled, his voice steady despite the gun aimed at his chest. "She's not anyone's property." What followed was a storm of violence, the ranch erupting into chaos. But Elijah fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, and everything to save. When the dust settled, the men were driven off, beaten and humiliated, and Elijah stood battered but unbroken. In the silence that followed, Leela rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you risk your life for me?" she whispered, clutching his bloodied shirt. Elijah, wary but resolute, looked at her with a softness that cut through his ruggedness. "Because you asked me to help you, and I will, for as long as I live." A month later, the ranch was no longer just Elijah's, it had become theirs. Together they built a life not defined by pain, but by resilience and hope. Leela, once broken and afraid, found her strength again, and Elijah, once lonely and hollow, found love in the most unexpected way. To anyone watching this story unfold, remember, no matter how broken you feel, no matter how dark your nights may seem, there is always hope, always someone who can help you rise again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the strength within us all. Because sometimes, a cry for help isn't the end, it's the beginning of healing, love, and new life. But life on the ranch wasn't a fairy tale overnight. Healing was a process, and both Elijah and Leela knew it. Some days the scars of her past seemed to weigh her down, while Elijah wrestled with his own ghosts, those long years of silence and grief that still clung to him. Yet every sunrise brought another chance. The land itself seemed to teach them lessons, that broken fences could be mended, storms would pass, and even the hardest soil could give life again if cared for with patience. One morning, Elijah found Leela standing by the corral, her hand resting gently on the muzzle of a young colt. She was smiling, a soft, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. He stopped in his tracks, just watching her. For the first time, she looked at peace. He realized then that what he was giving her wasn't just shelter. It was a chance to rediscover herself, and what she was giving him was far greater, a reason to keep living, to keep loving. Still, the world didn't forgive so easily. Word traveled in small towns, and rumors of a mysterious girl living on the Carter Ranch reached ears that shouldn't have heard them. One evening, Elijah received a letter slipped under his door, a threat scrawled in jagged handwriting, promising to take Leela back. His first instinct was rage, but then came fear. He knew what those men were capable of, and he knew protecting her meant more than just fighting. It meant finding a way for her to truly be free. So he made a decision. For weeks, Elijah worked tirelessly, gathering papers, speaking with the sheriff in town, and pulling every string he had left from his younger days. Finally, one morning, he handed Leela a small packet of documents. Her hands trembled as she opened them, her eyes widening when she saw her name written across official papers, proof of her identity, proof that she belonged here, not to anyone else. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "You gave me back my life," she whispered. Elijah simply shook his head. "No," he said softly, "you took it back. I just stood beside you. As seasons changed, the ranch blossomed with new life, fields turned green, calves were born, and laughter returned to a place that had once known only silence. Leela became part of the land, her hands strong and steady as she worked beside Elijah. Together, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And yet, the greatest change wasn't in the land or the ranch, but in their hearts. The girl who had once begged for help was now a woman who stood tall, unafraid of her shadows. The rancher who had once been frozen by grief now carried warmth in every step, because he no longer walked alone. Their story wasn't perfect, it was human. It was marked by blood, tears, and loss, but also by courage, faith, and love. And it carried a message meant for anyone who felt broken, abandoned, or lost. No wound is too deep to heal, no night too dark to outlast the dawn. So, dear viewer, if you've stayed with us until now, remember this: the power of kindness can change lives. One choice to help, one act of compassion can create ripples that last forever. If this story touched you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Because you never know, your act of reaching out may be the very thing that saves someone who is silently whispering, "Please help me."